Welcome to the Escape Pod. I'm DK, and I'm joined as always by JB, Jim, and Sean. We are here at Southtown 101 in the beautiful Pub Sports Radio studios. Today on the pod, we'll be talking about getting thrifty, CDC updates, Joe Biden potential presidency and what that might look like, the Donovan Mitchell versus Jamal Murray show, a quick NBA roundtable, and as you can see, we're all dressed in attire. We were given $20 to go to our local thrift store.
We were given $20 by ourselves.
By ourselves, that's true.
So, yeah.
Or maybe a sponsor, and you could be that sponsor. But we'll get to that in a second. As always, we start off with first thoughts. Sean, the Cowboy Spain, how are we feeling?
I'm feeling great, man. I'm feeling great. Opening thoughts for this week, just to give a quick update on what's going on in schools. As everybody knows, school's back in session, and it's a little bit different this year, obviously. But next week, we plan on doing like the phase-in, right? So we're kind of bringing students back. So they told us today to expect up to 500 kids on our campuses next week. So it's going to be interesting to see how we make that happen. I've tried to stay positive and just be with the just go with the flow, if you will, right? Just so I don't get too high or too low. But it's going to be interesting. So far, I've gotten some feedback from some people for how virtual learning is going. Some people think it's going great for some and not so much for others. And I think the overwhelming factor is really the age of the kids. Like my high school kids are doing fine. They're old enough to they're old enough to be able to read, to learn. But those kids that don't know how to read yet, like my nephews, they're struggling right now. So that K through.
You mean your toddler nephews can't read?
K through like third or fourth, where they don't even know where the mute button is on Zoom. They're kind of struggling right now. So we'll see where it goes. Next week, maybe everybody goes back to school and it's just a massive shit show and we shut it down again. But those are my opening thoughts, man.
Jimbo Slice?
I very clearly promised that we would talk about tennis this week, and so here I am talking about tennis. Turns out I looked
Man of his word.
Your shirt rocks with it, man.
It sure as hell does.
Yeah.
I actually looked online to see if there's anything tennis related going on that I could talk about. It turns out there's a huge tennis tournament. One of the Grand Slams is going on right now, the U.S. Open. Who knew?
I know. I actually watched a tiny bit.
That was you?
Staying relevant out there, man.
Yeah, it was.
I saw you watching that thing.
I wasn't meaning to, but the NBA game, I was waiting for Game 7 in it.
Yeah, so there you go. Tennis is happening. There are other ball sports going on.
Nice.
JB, how we living?
Just terribly. No, actually quite well. I just got back from
the phone.
I had a 2-day getaway to Denver. I've driven through it a few times, flown through it a few times, but never properly.
The Mile High City, I understand.
Yeah.
Why do they call it that?
The elevation,
never mind,
I think.
go on with your story.
Now, lots of cool breweries, lots of cool beer, lots of art, and weather that isn't 1,000 degrees outside every day. So, and there are other things that Colorado's known for. But yeah, it was good. It was a good trip. And I also saw that Ed Markey beat Joe Kennedy in the primary for Massachusetts Senate seat. So that was like a cherry on top to an already cool trip. So yeah, I have nice things to say today.
We're not talking sports yet, but I just shout out to Jimmy Butler and Chris Paul for making post-work fun, watching guys have pride and kind of bring back some old school basketball where they just have something out for people to prove. So I really enjoyed watching them play. I wanted to keep mine short so we can go ahead and get to our thrift shop experiment here. This was, I believe, JB's idea. Yeah, so
it wasn't my idea.
I mean, JB is quick to take it, so it's his.
We almost didn't tell Jim.
It turned into a collective effort.
Let Jim wear what he normally wears and see if it wins.
Yeah, we eventually told Jim, I think on Monday, and he made do.
So there were some drinking shenanigans, and JB came up with an idea, and on the spot, we each, maybe one of us is rocking a $200 cowboy hat and isn't really following the rules. But for the most part, all of our outfits are under $20. I think Sean uses 21.
So it was about 23, and then I traded a $3 thrift hat for this couple $100 cowboy hat.
But so we're close here. We're close.
And technically he didn't pay for that, so
that's
it's
true.
It's within the realms. Yeah, I mean he's good.
Great point. Great point. So we're gonna just go around the square. Jim, we'll start with you, and then we'll roll over to Abraham Linkler, and we'll go from there. So Jim, tell us a little bit of your inspiration, and if you wanna to model afterwards for the camera, I mean, feel free.
I may well do that. That's Sean's hat, by the way. That's why it doesn't work. So yeah, I was late to the party. I learned about this recently. Was it Sunday or Monday? Whenever it was, and I wasn't able to actually even try until today. And this is what I got today. I had all kinds of grand ideas of what I was going to have for a theme, and none of that works out when you go to the thrift store. They have stuff that they don't give a shit about your theme.
Yeah.
So I found some pants, and the camera probably doesn't do them justice. They're pretty goofy, kind of loud. And then I saw this freaking shirt, and I was like, "Holy shit balls!
I like that.
I'm getting that thing. I got to get it. There's no reason not to get that thing.
It's large, but it still looks cool.
I mean,
Large and in charge.
Yeah.
I don't even know what color this is, but it's loud.
I mean, those are louder than Easter colors. I mean, like
Damn right they are.
Yeah, this is like ultraviolet Easter.
Rory McIlroy is mad at me for wearing this.
JB,
Well,
tell me about your get up.
this is I don't know, man. I didn't really go into the store with this idea. It just came to me as soon as I saw the hat and some suspenders around. But yeah, it's inspired by the book and later film A Clockwork Orange. If you haven't seen it, then I don't know what to tell you. I probably look pretty stupid.
Is this your plug on it right now?
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, see it.
Yeah, get into Stanley Kubrick if you haven't already. But yeah, that's where mine comes from. I'm lacking a bit of eye makeup.
I thought you were a struggling magician when I first saw you.
that too. But yeah,
It goes a lot of different ways there.
yeah, we've got suspenders, got the hat, the dark twisted movie, and that's kind of where I was going as soon as I saw the stuff. Dustin, what the hell's going on over here, man?
Man,
What kind of weekend did you have?
I mean, there's a lot of versatility in this. This is like a piece of art here, and you can kind of maybe you see Shaggy from Scooby-Doo,
Cracker Hendrix.
maybe so. Maybe I'm going to Woodstock. I mean, you really don't know. It's kind of beauty is in the eye of the beholder here. That I'm just mixing it up, So who knows? Who knows what this is? Honestly, there's limitless potential in my outfit. So if we do vote, factor that in. I'm going to be the one who actually takes the opportunity to strut my stuff as Sean's talking.
Yeah.
Because I'm not gonna be one of those lames that's not like gonna be like I'm not gonna try hard.
Oh,
So Sean, it's your turn.
I like it, man. Y'all can't see the capris that Dustin has on, but
you'll be able to.
it's legit. Well, for those of y'all that are tuning in on the podcast app and don't see the video of Dustin modeling in the camera right now, what I have on is it's inspired by none other than Elizabeth Warren. I'm kind of like a hipster / confused cowboy. Am I progressive, or am I still trying to appeal to Southerners? I don't know, but it's by design, right? I also
You
cheated.
got all your bases covered.
Yeah, I also cheated, and the money doesn't add up.
Do you want a casino?
Yeah, because I went over on the budget that I set in the rules.
You're doing great.
And I'm solely focused on just beating my opponents, not actually appealing to the rules or anything like that. So I do know that even if I come in dead last, I'm still number one in Dustin's heart, and that's what's important to me.
Honestly, that really is a truly progressive look.
It's not bad. I will tell the viewers that my shorts don't actually button up. It is about 2 sizes
Prove
too
it.
small. But yeah, it was fun, and I can't wait to see the looks we get when we go out tonight, man.
That's right. So we have mandated that we have at least one drink for 30 minutes out in general public after this. So we will be discussing general humility next week on the podcast. So since we're over the thrift store stuff, we'll go ahead and jump in at the CDC updates. That this week in the news, there was a report from the CDC releasing that 94% of COVID-19 deaths had comorbidities, leaving only 6% that were solely from COVID-19. Obviously, a lot of conservatives ran with that. There's
As
some
they
other
would.
statistics that we can talk about. Maybe there's some righteousness to both sides, having some gripes. But JB, we'll start with you. What are your first takes on the CDC release?
I mean, man, it was a bit. I don't know. It gave me a weird feeling to see it, because either way, 160 or 170,000 dead is still 170,000 dead. But when you read that, my first thought is, man, there's so many other things that could contribute to your death if you have a pre-existing condition. And I think once you run the numbers, I think the actual like straight COVID deaths are closer to about 10,000, and that's still nothing to scoff at, right? Like our country spent $2 trillion and wrecked the Middle East over an event where under 3,000 people died, and so for this one, in a very short amount of time, you still got 10,000 people dead, and you could still argue that a lot of that could have been prevented. But yeah, the numbers seem to be much lower than what we originally thought. So it's a strange feeling, and I don't know. It's kind of depressing, I guess, to see people take it and run with it politically, because it's still a very serious thing. Like there's still water to it. It's just, fuck, man. Like 10,000 is quite a significant bump down from the 170.
Yeah, my initial take off that is, I mean, I wasn't as hurt by those numbers because 50% of our country is obese, and just obesity itself is a comorbidity. I mean, there's so many different things.
Well, yeah, heart conditions like diabetes, the whole
like
rat,
all
right?
that stuff. Like there's so many different things that, like, so I had looked up too, and like the same report, it stated 92% of the death certificates that were mentioned in the virus that COVID-19 was the underlying cause of death. Yeah. So it's not like it was just like oh yeah, like this was it was considered by doctors, and we seem to take doctors' opinions very, very seriously. Like that 92% of those deaths, COVID was not only like one of the things, it was the underlying cause to it.
That kind of comes down to that, right, Dustin? Is did you die of COVID, or did you die because you had, with COVID? Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. I didn't take it as big as a shot as Justin, as you kind of made it out to be, as if like the numbers they're kind of they're being bent. We're cherry picking stats right now. This is not something that you have to take it with a grain of salt, is essentially what I'm saying. But let's kind of not talk about so much of the numbers. I want to talk to the scientifically illiterate that will misinterpret this data and these facts to fit their own narrative or agenda. And my argument to those people is that the other week when we covered the Axios interview, and Donald Trump said, without the research or the knowledge of these new numbers being put out, Donald Trump accepted and verbally said 150,000 dead. It is what it is, right? And so where I'm going with this is essentially saying, like, his following didn't even bat an eye. They accepted it for what it was. They're just casualties of a pandemic. We didn't do there's nothing else that we could have possibly done. So it's just kind of strange to see them take a couple of paces back at this point and say, well, wait a minute, it's not 150,000 anymore. It's only 10,000, because just a couple of weeks ago they were shitting on the CDC, and now all of a sudden they put out some numbers that they can agree with, and now they're back on the camp, right? They're back on the science train now. So I'm not buying it for one minute. I hate that we continuously politicize science and we bend and shift these numbers to kind of fit our own personal narratives. And I'm kind of over it all at this point. And I can understand where people who are already fed up with the mainstream media can also throw the CDC in the same camp at this point and say, like, who the fuck do we believe at this? What numbers are real at this point? So,
Jim, what are your first thoughts?
To be honest with you, I actually thought the 6% number was high of people who died of nothing with having no comorbidity and just died of COVID-19. I thought that was a little surprising to me. Why COVID-19 exacerbates or is exacerbated by comorbidity. In my eyes, it's kind of seems that way. All of the comorbidities that people had, it's unrealistic to expect that none of those people would have died in the absence of COVID-19. Yeah. So some of them would have died anyway.
Right.
All of them did die. And I find it hard to believe that, people are jumping on this like, see, COVID-19 had nothing to do with it. And they'll all, right now, anybody who's listening to this or watching this who was on that train is now saying, well, we never said it had nothing to do with it, but it's not as big a deal as it was being made out to be.
Yeah.
I think it really is. I think it still is.
Yeah, I think Sean really makes a great point that I think is politics in a nutshell.
Hate Sean.
Whoa.
I know, guys. Believe me. Actually, I have a stomach ache. Let me go to the restroom real quick. But man, I think what he said is great. Like, we treat this almost like how sports talk radio is, where you're just gonna have your side no matter what, and whatever stat you can find that supports you, you're gonna grab it.
And this is an easy one to do that with.
Yes,
it is a very easy one to do that with.
And then whatever stat hurts you, you're like, I mean, everything's biased, right? And so I think that's a really, really easy thing to do. And I think that's an important thing. Just like try and not have the end answer already figured out, and try and let the science and the statistics. But let's jump back in there, JB. What are you thinking of what we're talking about?
That's as with every other major subject in the country right now. Like, that's where we fall short. Is it's like everything has become so politicized, where there are very few people that I guess have the ability to say anymore, like, hey, they've made a good point. Right. The opposition has made a good point, or just, this is some new information and it has changed my view because of that. Or, well, I understand why the numbers may have been skewed, and so there's no give on either side. And so it's like, when new information comes around, it's like, well, if I can't manipulate it to fit my narrative, then I don't want it, or it's fake. Well said. And that's what's plagued us, not just with CDC numbers and COVID, but with everything.
I think when I'm actually engaging in a spirited conversation with an intelligent conservative, one of the first things that I'll ask them.
A what?
An intelligent conservative.
Okay,
and they're still out there. And one of the first things that I'll ask them, essentially, I'll offer a concession, but I want to hear you. What are give me one criticism of President Trump, just so I know that you're not coming from a place where you just blindly support somebody. And like you said, Dustin, I'm just going to reach at whatever he threw out on his Twitter this week. And then from there, we can go ahead and get started and having some great conversations at that point. But like we said earlier, just 4 weeks ago, COVID was still a conspiracy theory, but hydroxychloroquine worked. And it's like, you have to choose one or the other, man. You can't have it both ways at this point. Okay. But we're going to continue to watch these numbers. I think the biggest, kind of like the election, I think the biggest shortfall or shortcoming here, the biggest takeaway for me is that it's like, at this point, like, we're questioning ourselves with everything. And to me, that's just disheartening.
Well, let's go ahead, and that's a pretty good segue, talking about, both sides. And that we've talked a lot about the Donald Trump presidency. But, Democrats have been pushing a message that the biggest thing about Joe Biden is that he literally isn't Donald Trump. But today, let's talk about him as if 2020 was a normal year. What does a Joe Biden America truly look like?
Who's taking that first? Y'all want me to take it first?
I mean, aside from one term,
right?
Whether or not the Democrats stay at one term for clear reasons, but yeah, Jim, I want you to hit this off.
We almost never want.
What does a Biden administration look like?
Well, Biden seems to he seems to blow whichever way the wind blows. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of conviction one way or the other on anything. Hey. You
mean a major U.S. politician isn't necessarily there because of their convictions?
Well, Donald Trump is whatever he thinks is, goddamn it, what he thinks. He didn't give a rat's ass what people say, for the most part.
JB, let me go to you next. I have a question. I had a couple friends that were concerned. Actually, they know that we have the podcast, and they actually asked for your view on this. So, do you think that a Joe Biden so shout out to JB being trying to get. Does Joe Biden make the Black Lives Matter movement? Does it actually make it less important? Do you think some of these things actually get pushed to the side, that maybe Donald Trump is a little bit of a kindling to the fire of some of this movement?
That's a great question, by the way. That's if you ask me, I would honestly say that if you have somebody like Trump in office, even though there's no smoking gun directly from his administration with legislation that hurts black people, right? Like it's stuff that's already been in place, but because he's adopted support of racists and because he said racist things, that emboldens the movement, right? So like if something else happens, when something else happens, people jump behind it and the movement grows. But it's like with Joe Biden, I think there's a false sense of security, right? Like if he wins, people think, well, Trump's out and the movement's done what it's done. It's like, well, you're still talking about the architect of the 94 crime bill. You're still talking about a guy who, in his early career was talking about, was helping segregationists in their fight against busing, and was talking about, I don't want my children to grow up in a racial jungle. So it's like, you're talking about a guy who, if he really cares about this movement at all, he cares about it because it's politically advantageous to do so. So for me, I think if he wins, maybe the movement even takes a hit because there's a false sense of security, and maybe not all, but maybe a third to half of the people that were allies in this thing think that you've done something great by putting a corporatist Democrat into office, and I don't think it's a big deal.
Those are some very interesting points that both of y'all made, and I want to touch on them, and then I want to touch on your question too, Dustin, about Black Lives Matter. So, Jim, what you're not arguing, but what you're saying is that Joe Biden is guilty of essentially following popular public opinion. Is that right? Like back in the 70s and 80s, he's a moderate, and then as the party slowly inches to the left, right, like they have been in the last couple of years, and it is a slow inch in my opinion. I think the fear is, it's kind of like what John Kasich said at the Democratic National Convention, is that the biggest fear of these other moderate conservatives is that Joe Biden will turn sharp left if he's elected. Right? Is that kind of more or less where you're coming from, a place like that? Well,
he might. Well, I don't know about turning sharp left if he's elected. He probably will veer that way, and then when there's backlash against it, he'll veer back. I just think that he's looking for opinion polls, and that's what I believe in now. Okay. Whatever the opinion poll is.
I just think that there's this big misconception that Americans overwhelmingly regard somebody that is not afraid to recognize that Black Lives Matter. They kind of take that as, they see it as somebody that's progressive, whereas I see it as somebody that's just they're simply acknowledging that they're sympathetic to somebody's cause.
If you could,
there's those are two totally different things.
No, if you could personify a candidate, if let's say if streets being painted with Black Lives Matter, or streets being renamed Black Lives Matter Avenue, if that could be a person, it's a Joe Biden, Kamala Harris type of Democrat. That's exactly what it is. It's like, well, we adopt this because it's trendy. We adopt this because we can swing a bunch of votes from it. But do our actions over the last 20 years or so have anything to do with this movement and this way of thinking? No, they don't.
Yeah, I just don't see. I'll finish with this on Joe Biden's presidency. Like, to me, he's a solid moderate. I understand. I think that's the best argument, is that you could say, well, he kind of goes where the wind takes him a little bit, and he doesn't want to stray too far off of public opinion. I understand that. I could recognize that argument, but to me, he is, and he always will be a solid modern day moderate Democrat, and I don't think that he's gonna get too far away from that platform. I don't see that happening.
No.
Yeah, I would. Anyone who's trying to say he's going to potentially go too far progressive, is every time Bernie has to say something positive about Joe, he goes, everybody knows Joe and I don't see this very similarly. He has to say it every time, just out of self-respect. And we've talked about
that's a fact.
We've talked about how AOC hasn't gotten a phone call. We've talked about how a lot of these people haven't. But who did we hear? He had a great relationship. John McCain. We get John Kasich standing the literal fork in the road. We have all these little things where they're having good relationships. So I would worry about him going farther right than what would be liked than going farther left for me personally.
He's laughed in the faces of people that have talked about Medicare for all, like universal health care. he's laughed in the faces of those people, and he's also talked. I mean, as far as foreign policy, like there's times where corporate, like moderate Democrats, talk.
He's
they
a
resemble,
neocon warmonger.
No, yeah,
He's a warmonger.
they resemble war hawks even more than the Trump administration would, which you would never imagine that being true, but it is. And it's just like, yeah, man, for anybody that watches this show, I don't think there's any of you left, but for anybody that watches this show that defines themselves as a conservative, I told you this last week. Please, you have nothing to worry about if people around you and the old fox on the television is telling you that Joe Biden is radical from somebody that's left. I'm telling you that he's not. Like, you have nothing to worry about.
It's go ahead, Jim. Go ahead.
I will tell you that it's not politically smart in a capitalist country to stray too far to the left in terms of socialism, advocating socialist policies. Because I mean, even the Democrats didn't select Bernie Sanders.
Supposedly,
right? They didn't pick him. They don't want him.
Or Warren, the two most progressive.
They do not want him because they know that that's a losing strategy. So maybe it's strictly politically savvy.
Are we talking about?
You mean a winning strategy like 2016?
Yeah, that one.
Jim, are we talking about Democrats or are we talking about the DNC? I just want to differentiate between the two here.
Well, why would you?
Well, because there's a funny thing called superdelegates that aren't necessarily chosen by the people, but more typically aligned and moved and influenced by the DNC themselves. So whether or not Joe Biden had a massive comeback on Super Tuesday or not, I'm saying somewhere in Vegas, in my opinion, it was already written that this guy was going to be their candidate. Like, I felt like that was decided a long time ago before March.
When in the history of the party, when in the history of American politics before Super Tuesday, when has second and third place dropped out 2 days before that have no reason to fear Joe Biden, who at the time was sitting in fifth? That's my point, right? Is that at what point in American history has second and third place dropped completely? Fourth place, who visibly has no chance of staying in, Warren, decides to stay in, and it's just like before that 2 day mark, Bernie is predicted to sweep the entire Super Tuesday for the most part. So that's my question: is when it comes to what the people want to what the DNC wants, I'm not one of those people that's screaming about like voting mail fraud. I'm talking about you're closing poll stations and you're convincing second and third place to drop when they have no reason to fear Joe Biden. I don't think that's ever happened before.
Heading into Super Tuesday, it was well understood that Joe Biden was going to pick up a shit ton of ground. Everybody knew that he was going to pick up a shit ton of ground going into Super Tuesday. So it's not like it came out of nowhere and everybody thought
but
that
is it
Biden
enough?
was still
Is it
gonna be
enough?
the front runner
Is it enough
after
to
Super
win?
Tuesday.
Is it enough to win though if he splits votes with Pete and Klobuchar?
Oh, I'm not here to tell you that, but I'm telling you that everybody knew that Biden was going to pick up a ton of ground on Super Tuesday, and Sanders, the lead that he had was not safe at all.
But I think if you look at polling, that would disagree with that. That you see that Trump and Bernie have the two strongest bases. They're not gonna their two votes aren't swayable. Everyone else's was. So if you break it up into 4 or 5 pieces, Bernie got 35 to 39% in every state, and he wasn't going to go much higher because of the Democrat Socialist, and he wasn't going to go an inch lower. And so as soon as you drop it down to 2 people, and now you break that pie up from 5 to 2, all of a sudden 35% doesn't look as good. I mean, that was one of those things that all the number people are like, all right, now it's like the game is being shown.
Yeah, and normally Super
that.
Tuesday is not narrow. It's not narrowed down to two people straight away.
Right.
There's at least a
and
few
the one
lingering
other
that are-
person that's labeled the progressive is still being like, it was all the people that weren't technically progressive in the. It was just I think it was the one way that chips, because if Joe Biden didn't do well in South Carolina, he was going to have to drop out.
Yeah,
like South Carolina was the thing that changed everything.
And once that happened, it was pretty much over.
But Jim, let me remind you, Jim, like there's nothing like Joe Biden's presidency is going to be, if it happens, and I don't think it will, but it would be very similar to an Obama administration. Where did anything really change in your life when Obama was president? No. You were probably upset for 4 years. Not you, Jim, but if you're a conservative, you were probably upset for 4 years and sick and tired of seeing him on the news. But nothing legitimately changed. But let me remind you, Jim, in the primaries, Joe Biden, and I watched every single one of the debates, he didn't win, nor did he even come into a close second in a single. He just survived. There is nothing inspiring about this guy.
Agreed.
And you can't convince me that the voters just showed out. Like, this is who the voters wanted. I don't believe that.
This is the thing. He won. I don't know what it would take to.
I'm a sore loser.
I don't know what it would take to sway me, but I'm saying I don't think Joe Biden winning Texas, for example, is nuts to me. Like, very few offices on the ground, very little grassroots effort at all in so many of these states, and then wins on Super Tuesday, like overwhelmingly in some of these places. And so, like I said, I'm not gonna scream voter fraud or anything, but again, him being the candidate reflects what the DNC and what the party itself represents, unfortunately, and that is right here, complacency. If you like the way things have been going, then not much is going to change for you. If you have started to acknowledge some of the inequities in our society, and if you've started to realize that you want an actual change in the way that politics run in America, then he's absolutely not for you. And that's what I feel like that's lost on so many people, is it gets to be, Trump or Biden. It's like, man, aside from the racist, embarrassing shit that is going to come out of Trump's mouth often, as far as day-to-day politics that benefit the rich and not average working Americans, that's going to stay the same. Nothing will change. And he's actually been quoted that, like, his opponents say that. He's been quoted as saying, like, nothing will change.
Sean, I want to kind of bring it back to, we are kind of doing, I guess, what everyone does, is saying all the things Biden's not. And so, like, that, we wanted to try and do something different.
He's really just one thing. He's not Trump.
Right. And so, but I want to try and, like, if we can, I went through painstakingly yesterday, whenever I knew we were talking about this, the Joe Biden website. And I clicked
I'm sorry.
I know, it was terrible. I went through each one of his things, and there's very few promises. He did specifically state in there that he'd support the Green New Deal. And that he talked about a more science-based response to COVID, and he talked about the increase on taxes of people making wages over $400,000. Some of the things that are missing on that I would think are very important was no mention of big pharma. I thought that was
those are lifelong friends of Democratic candidates. You talked about the war side of it, how he's been, his history on that. And then what I thought was really interesting was the giant corporations, nothing on there. Like, nothing on there. So those things, like talking about some of the, I'm going to bring it to you, Sean. What do you, if you were saying the next 4 years, what do you think, as far as like the nuts and bolts of governing, what do you think are some things that will and won't be done in the Joe Biden administration?
Well, let me add to your list of things that won't be done. And Biden is, in a sense, fortunate. And we haven't seen too much of Biden, right? I'm not sure why he wants to debate Donald Trump. I don't think that's going to end well for Biden at all. I think he's going to eat him alive. Yeah. But let me add to your list, Dustin, of what is not going to happen. Joe Biden he's very fortunate that COVID has kept everybody at home, because we've completely ignored the gun issue. There hasn't been a mass shooting because there's not mass gatherings, right? This isn't because of anything other than we're just not gathering like we used to. And therefore these tragedies they're not happening as they had before. And so he's very fortunate that didn't come about, because when he was primarying, like when he announced that he was very loose with coming out saying that he was going to be, tough on guns, and he was going to have bans on AR type weapons. And you haven't heard no mention of that in the last couple of months. And so he's very fortunate in that state, because I don't think a lot of those swing voters, I don't think that they have, these sentiments against guns and the Second Amendment where he's going to get more votes having that progressive stance right there. But again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I don't think that a Biden presidency looks too far from what a 12 to 2016 Obama presidency looked like. And I think if Biden were to win, the world isn't going to celebrate Joe Biden becoming president. They're going to celebrate the fact that 45 is out of office. And you'll see that worldwide, people celebrating this character, this figure exiting, hopefully forever at that point.
Jim?
Sean makes a good point.
Oh, that's two today.
That two good
Even a
points
broken
by Sean
clock is
today.
right twice a day.
Look at this
I'm
guy.
too excited.
So, Obama took over, and right in the middle of the economy taking a huge dump, right? At the end of Obama's presidency, the stock market was soaring. Trump is taking credit for the great stock market. And by the way, not everybody, but many people view the stock market as an indicator of the economy as a whole.
Terrible indicator.
Tell all of those unemployed people about the great stock market that's going on.
It's
right
an
now.
indicator of what rich white people are thinking.
Well, not even rich white people. I'm not a rich white person, but I'm invested in the stock market through my 401k or TSP, which is kind of a 401k, and I'm doing pretty well. But that doesn't mean, I'm personally doing okay, but the economy as a whole is really not. Nobody could even pretend that it is. And yet that is what Donald Trump says is he's done. That's the result of what he's done that is so great. Well, he's just doing nothing to impede the progress it was already making under Obama. What that tells me, and what I already knew before Obama ever showed up, was that the president has almost nothing to do with the stock market. Business people have to do with the stock market. The stock market, business people are greedy, and greed is going to work around whatever obstacles are in their way.
JB, what are your thoughts on, I know a couple things that are near and dear to your heart, healthcare and corporate structures. What do you see as those two entities? And you can throw a big farm in there if you want to. What do you think about those things potentially under Joe Biden?
So that's what I guess I would say to people that are undecided voters or people that don't know quite what to think. When it comes to Joe Biden and what are run-of-the-mill Democrats, they're not going to have very much to say about big pharma. They're not going to have very much to say about changing our foreign policy. They're not going to have very much to say about taxing corporate entities, because those are their lifeblood. Those are their friends, just the same as they are for many Republicans. Joe Biden's not here to change any of those issues. He's not there to hold any of the 1% accountable for the problems that we're having on the ground in America. And if he comes out and actually says any of that, if he actually does come out and say, I want to change this, then it's damaging to his election chances. So yeah, in summary, not much will change, because in order for change, the candidate would have to attack the hand that is feeding it money and the hand that is feeding it campaign dollars.
So you're voting Biden?
Fuck that.
So Sean, let me ask you a question. This might not be doable for you, and I'll kind of go around this, and this can kind of be our last Joe Biden thing. Is what, if anything, could Joe Biden do or say or make a promise of that would at least push you in a direction where you'd at least have an inkling of potentially voting for him with any lack of dread?
I like that. That's a great question. And the first thing that he would have to do is you go back, and just like Republicans came into office to repeal Obamacare in 2016 when they won the executive and the legislative branch, we're going to repeal the tax cuts that they made to the wealthy, and we're going to restructure those so it's going to benefit the working class of Americans. And at the same time, we need to make some sort of grounds. I'm not saying dismantle the private sector of healthcare, but we need to make some grounds to make affordable healthcare and affordable college a real thing. And to me, like, outside of that, I'm not taking on any sort of gun issues right now. I'm trying to take care of the middle class, the working class Americans that get up every day at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. They go to work, they punch in, those are the people that I'm trying to take care of, and that's exactly what he would have to do to get me to go out in November.
Jim?
I hate to do this, but Sean nailed it right there. You have to appeal. You can't appeal to fuck the rich. You cannot do that, because if you say I'm going to make sure that tax the rich, is that what you're on board with?
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to work, because the rich don't pay taxes. They pass those taxes on to the consumer, and that's us.
And the rich decide everything.
The rich decide everything too. So if you say you're going to soak the rich, you're not going to soak the rich. The rich got rich by being smarter than that.
Right.
So say that if you're interested in tax policy, say you're interested in more fairness in taxes. Don't say tax the rich, because nobody gives a shit about that, because the rich are going to overcome that. Whatever taxes they have to pay, or that you think they'll have to pay, they won't have to pay. They'll pass those on to the consumer, or they'll do whatever it takes to exploit the loopholes that enable them to not pay those taxes. And those loopholes, by the way, sometimes they're giving away to charity. Let's say I give away all my profits to charity. That charity performs a service that people otherwise expect the government to perform. So now the government doesn't have to do it.
It wouldn't be all your profits, but it would be,
well, whatever profits you give
taxed.
away,
Right.
what profits you give away to that charity to avoid being taxed. Now that charity performs a service that everybody else expects the government to perform. Now they don't have to, because the charity does it.
even if it's a charity that
JB,
somehow
this
gets
is
money back to you.
We could talk about this for
JB,
hours.
This is Jim's turn. Now
That's
it's
true.
your
That's
turn.
true.
What would outside of hell freezing over and pigs growing wings out of their asses would get you to be behind riding with Biden?
What would get me to vote for Joe Biden?
Yeah, that's
Holy
right.
shit. I'd turn full pivot and get behind Medicare for all, for starters. And then when it comes down to it, he would have to show some sort of willingness to help working Americans. So it's like what Sean and Jim have already hit on, but it doesn't amount to, I know that he's not going to betray his corporate buddies, and I know he's not going to betray the entire party. But there has to be some sort of accountability to where you say, hey, working Americans are hurting. Working Americans need a bone, basically. And if you're in a calendar year where Bezos, Zuckerberg, Musk, and those guys are almost doubling their worth, that's a problem. Whenever the lower tier of the society, which is everyone else, is suffering, that's what he'd have to do. So I would say, in summary, Medicare for all, and if he doesn't get behind that, he can fucking get lost.
You didn't double
and accountability for working Americans.
You didn't double your worth during the pandemic.
No.
So
I'll be quick on mine. My number one, what I would love to see if he came out with like antitrust stuff, like that would be something that's really big to me. Like y'all talked about taxation, big pharma, and then him getting behind early that minimum wage, I think would be a big deal. Like those would be enough. Like I'm not. You're right on the. I would love to see him do that for healthcare. I just think that's one of those. That's a hell freezing over type thing for him. That, but
he'll never do it.
No, he won't.
That's why. So you get an insight on what my voting will be like.
So with healthcare being an issue, if you don't have the money for it, the one thing you can do is get some CBD.
Oh.
If some of you can go out and go out to Denver and put a camera around your neck and just kind of really, dress the part of being the coolest dude out there. Maybe you're a 6'5" swing man with a nice spin move. 6'5". And then, 6'6".
He used to be 6'5".
6'5". I mean, at one point, yeah, exactly.
Earlier,
I mean,
6'6" without shoes.
And maybe you have a really cool camera strap that's like, it's really impressive, but maybe you don't have those options.
I don't have those options.
Sean, it's okay. It's okay. You can go to Natural Heights. It's here in San Antonio. If you have stress, anxiety, joint pain, PTSD, insomnia, all of the above, I mean, that's Natural Heights. Are for you, not for the JBs of the world. All right. Up next, we'll go on to some sports stuff. We got
balls. We're going on to what again, Dustin?
Sports.
Balls.
The Donovan Mitchell versus Jamal Murray show ended in 7 games. Murray and Mitchell combined for 472 points a series, breaking a 5-decade-old record held by Jerry West and John Havlicek. So there's for y'all three trivia guys.
Hey, what would
Maybe
the 2-on-2 look like?
That would be tough for Jerry West and old John.
I thought Wilt Chamberlain had that record on his own or something.
The logo would now be Jamal Murray if that 2-on-2 game took place. But before we start rolling through the second rounds, what are we yelling about?
I said Jim's no, it would not.
Jim's over here making a ruckus.
Oh, yes. I distinctly heard a ruckus.
Give Jim 1 or 2 beers. Before we move on to our roundtable of going through all the second round matchups, what were y'all's thoughts on the Game 7 and that series in general? Sean, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Oh, I'm pretty biased, man. I'm a Nuggets guy now.
I'm a Nuggets guy.
I took off my jersey. I took off my Duncan jersey and I put on a Nuggets hat. I realized I'm not really a Spurs fan. I was just a Tim Duncan fan. But I'm biased, man. Like I think Murray is a hell of a player. For a while there during the series, I started asking some of my friends and a couple of y'all. I started asking if is Murray the number one and is Jokic the Robin? And in that Game 7, you kind of saw Jokic came alive. It wasn't necessarily the shootout that everybody wanted. It was more of I called it a 0-4 Spurs Pistons score because the final was 80-78. And so those guys, they were kind of struggling to find a bucket and find the bottom of the net at some point. But Jokic really stepped up for them. Jamal Murray he's just a man. And so is, not to take anything away from Donovan Mitchell, so are those guys. And I want to get into it a little bit later. We're going to go a round table on the series and Jamal Murray and Mitchell. But I do want to, since we talked about Booker a couple of weeks back, I kind of throw him in that same group, if you will.
Sure.
We're talking about like the 20s through the 30 best players in the league now, probably. And I wanted to get y'all's opinion. If we did like a start bench cut, maybe we could go round table on that here in a little bit. So just kind of chew on that. But again, I don't have the greatest expert opinion because I'm a Jamal Murray fan, man. And he balled out this series.
Let's this is your time. This is you've had a couple for the first time. You've made a couple good points. Throw out a start bench cut real quick, and we'll go.
We'll go with it.
We're ready for you to fail. So go ahead and list someone that's retired or something. Throw it out there.
You throw out the start bench cut?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay,
Start it. Go ahead, man.
All right, I'm gonna
cut Sean.
I'm gonna start Donovan Mitchell. Actually,
who's our 3 people?
We're going Donovan Mitchell.
Okay.
We're going Jamal Murray. And Booker.
Oh.
All right, you got it. So because we covered a little Booker couple weeks back, right, when the Suns were doing their thing. Start bench cut.
I was here.
All right. I'm starting Mitchell. I think he's explosive. I think on both sides of the ball, that dude, he swags some shots in. I'm gonna bench Murray, and I'm cutting Booker, man. He's
cutting D-Book.
I think anybody could do what, not anybody, but I think those two guys could do what Booker's been doing with the Suns. You're balling with no pressure, no expectations. And these guys did it when it counts in the playoffs.
JB, before we get your longer take, what's your start bench cut on that? Then we'll throw it back to you.
Personally, man, I gotta go Mitchell, Murray, Booker.
Right there.
To be honest with you, I like Murray's game better. It's just that Mitchell's with a team of role guys and just gets it done. So I mean the Jazz have a solid team, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying in this conversation I gotta go Mitchell just because he put those guys on his back. Even though they lost the series, even though they were up 3-1, he's just a guy that I don't know, he's not even the flashiest, not even in the top 5 flashiest players at that position. He just gets in your ass and gets it done. So
you went, just to clarify,
Mitchell, Murray, Booker.
Okay,
is mine.
Right, so we're on the same page here. Dust, what do you think, Dustin?
I think you all 3 are probably right to be. That's a safe thing. I think Jamal Murray has the highest upside. He's just a shot maker, and you saw that late in games and officiating Titans. Jamal Murray can just make tough shots, and Donovan Mitchell, as incredible as he is, I think late in games he's going to get fouled, and he's kind of almost in that same spot as Harden is. Are they going to call the foul?
Yeah.
You saw the last play of the game where he probably got hit in the back of the arm, and in the second quarter of a game 3, it's called, but it's never going to be. That's never going to be. And Jamal Murray is just going to create space and get a good look. So I'm going to put Jamal Murray as my start. I'm going to put Donovan Mitchell as my bench player and Devin Booker. I have Donovan Mitchell ranked highest, but just as the go-to guy. Mitchell's a better defender, so I can very easy, to me it's very tight. But Jamal Murray is just one of those guys where he's just mastered the skillfulness in basketball of creating space, the finishes around the rim. Like he's not needing. He can score 40 points and shoot 4 free throws, and I don't think you can say a thing. Donovan Mitchell, if he gets 40, he's probably getting to the line about 15 times, and he's a little bit at the mercy of officiating, which isn't a bad thing because the dude gets contact and get wherever he wants. But if in a small thing like that, I'm going to go ahead and take the guy who doesn't need the officiating quite as much.
Jim?
I'm going to go with start Mitchell. I'm going to start Mitchell, even though he lost that series. And I'm going to cut Murray. What?
Oh, Booker
What
coming off the bench.
Hell? Yes.
He's got Booker
Taking Booker
somewhere
off the bench.
somewhere
I'm gonna
Booker's
cut-
following
I'm gonna
Jim on it. Facebook.
I'm going to cut Murray only because within that group, he's the one who has the most help. It seems that way.
That's true. That's
No,
true.
that's a really good point because I mean, if you look
Yes.
at Mitchell and Booker, it's not that there aren't any good players on the team. Nobody's saying that. They just don't have a Jokic. And if you play with a Nikola Jokic, that 2-man game, just having that threat on the pop and having that type of player to play with takes a ton of stress off of you. And whereas Mitchell, it's like, name the second best Jazz offensive threat, name the second best Suns offensive threat.
That's fair,
So
yeah.
I'm not mad at that list.
There's a common saying in coaching that says 3-point shooting makes up for a multitude of sins. And Jamal Murray is he's one of the biggest beneficiaries of that statement right there, because he's a phenomenal shooter. When he's able to get his feet set, man, that ball's going down the middle of the net. But he's not the best defender by any means. I think Donovan Mitchell's a better defender. I think he's a better rebounder than Murray. But that's how much there's been. That's how much shooting is useful, or that's how much of a prime is put on shooting in today's league. That a guy like Jamal Murray is in this conversation where he's better than a Donovan Mitchell at this point.
Which team do you think, or do you think either team poses much of a threat against the Clippers?
Of those two,
correct.
Neither.
See, I think there's a world where, again, to me, they have to phase back into Jokic being the man. That you can't ask Jamal Murray to average 37 against Kawhi, Paul George, and Pat Bev.
What if he does?
But if he does, it's great, but you can't expect it. But can
that would be huge news to me.
Can Jokic go to work on Montrezl Harrell and force double teams and create?
Yeah, yes.
That to me, that's not crazy.
Not with Harrell calling him all those names.
Jokic will use Harrell in the post.
I mean, they're going to have to play Zubac, and now all of a sudden, if he forces Zubac on the floor, that'll make it to where they can pick and roll. And now Zubac is going to have to make a decision: is he going to drop coverage on Jamal Murray? And if you drop coverage on Jamal Murray when big ass Jokic is setting a screen, all of a sudden now so to me, it's all about Jokic. If Jokic is going to have to be the best player in that series, that's going to be tough with that Kawhi Leonard guy on the other side. But I think there's a world where we're back here next Wednesday and Jokic is averaging, 27, 10, and 8, and all of a sudden the series is split. Like I'm not betting it, but I can see a road for them to be able to do that potentially.
I agree. I don't see a world where Montrezl Harrell can guard Jokic in the post, and I don't see a world where Zubac can guard him on the pick and pop. Right. So and I don't know. I actually don't know if we'd be saying that if he wasn't 30 pounds lighter, but he looks good, man. Like when he catches it at the 3 or when he catches it 15 feet, like he's slimmed down, he's quick. I mean, I think they're a tough matchup for the Clippers, and I think the Clippers would have been much happier to see the Jazz, to be honest.
I have to ask for my Cowboy friend, is it Jokic or Jokic?
Jokic.
Jokic, Johnny.
Jokic.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a really interesting series. We'll go ahead and push on to another series of where it's just like matchups are so important in basketball, where we talk about, Milwaukee versus Miami, where Milwaukee is obviously such an incredible team. Giannis is one of the best players, one of the best young players in the league, but they go up against a young Miami Heat team that just doesn't give up anything in transition. And they've got 4 different guys that can hit 5 threes. They've just got to me, they're the toughest team left in the playoffs. Just a bunch of
Talking about Miami.
To me, like if I'm just gonna pick one team, like just mentally and physically tough, the Clippers have a lot of those guys too. But I love watching Miami play. I think they've got a great coaching staff. Jimmy Butler is an absolute dog. They're locked in.
Yeah.
They just got shooters. Dragic is maybe one of the most slept on. I mean, JB's not sleeping on Dragic. For
JB's
obvious
a
reasons.
Huge fan of that Miami backcourt.
He loves Duncan Robinson.
Dragic, Robinson, and Harrow.
Yeah,
He loves all 3 of them.
tough.
He loves them. Some of them.
It's not even their skills. There's just something about all 3 of them.
I
that
can't
he
put my
loves.
thumb on it. I can't
Oh
put
my
my
God.
Jim. Can you?
There's just something about those 3 that JB really likes.
They're very good at basketball. If you guys hadn't noticed.
And they can all 3 get a sunburn.
Oh.
But what are y'all's thoughts on that series? Are y'all what would be, first off, let's just roll through. Let's get projections of this on the series, and then we'll start with JB on some analysis on that. Sean,
I'm not going to tell anybody anything new that they don't already know. Giannis, he needs more shooters around him. If not, he needs to develop his own mid-range game. If not, a 3-point shot. Right. That's how much there is a premium on shooting in this league. I don't see Miami completing the upset. I know that they were able to get the first, right? But I see this thing going 6, maybe 7. But Giannis he's going to find a way to advance, man.
So we'll give you Milwaukee in 6. Jim?
I don't see any reason to bet against Giannis, so I'm going to take Milwaukee, and I'm going to say 5 games.
So they're winning the next 4.
Oh, Jesus.
All right. JB?
Don't go to Vegas with Jim.
Don't ever go to Vegas with me.
Hey man, I'm going Miami in 7.
Oh,
you idiot! What do you know?
So I'm really torn here. I
see that.
I want to pick Miami a lot. I think there's a somewhat simple thing for Bood. It's quit treating the rotation like it's regular season and play Giannis 43, 44 minutes. Like him being in the 30s minutes is a crime. Like that's I think he played like 35, 36 minutes last. Like you can't do that. Like look at LeBron's stretch. And I think that's what you have to compare him to. It's LeBron early Cavs. And like LeBron would average 44, 45 minutes. It's like, look, I'm going to try and get you a break in the first half. And in the second half, like unless you get your 5th foul in the 3rd quarter, your ass is carrying us all the way. And like I think if they can up the minutes, I would lean Milwaukee in 7. I don't think Bud is an adjustment guy. Like he's playing the same rotations, he's doing the same shit. And Miami, the thing I love about them is Miami does not see this shit as an upset. Miami thinks they're the better team, and that's scary. Like Miami beat them twice in the regular season. Miami's obviously 1-0 now. So Miami's got a ton of confidence. I think they're a terrible matchup. And I want to pick them, but I'm going to still go with,
can't bet against the MVP.
The back-to-back MVP. No, I'm not. Miami in 7. All right. All right. JB?
That's the thing. The 2 things that stand out to me, right, is that Milwaukee's unique because they're the number 1 overall seed, but I think they're the one team that made the playoffs that doesn't have a certified closer, a certified guy that even if the defense is overhelping, you're still a risk for a bucket. And it's because Giannis is not a 3-point shooter, really not even a mid-range shooter.
And the ball's in Middleton's hands at the end.
Yeah. And so that's kind of worrisome for Milwaukee. And then also when you look at Miami, it's just they don't have a ton of weaknesses. So where they might lack in overall star power, they don't have a ton of weaknesses. They're fairly deep. They play hard. And then, like I said, if it comes down to Jimmy Butler closing against anybody that the Bucks have to close against, so if Miami can keep those games close and it comes down to it, I got to ride with Butler over anybody, and that's all. With all due respect to Giannis, I think that they're definitely built for the regular season and maybe not so much for the postseason.
We often hype the something in your eyes, like that look, but
Yeah.
Jimmy Butler literally
He's got it.
Like you can just see whenever he gets going. It's a Jim.
I couldn't agree more. Which teams are we talking about?
Great transition to. Did you want to keep it here?
Let me ask y'all a quick question, man, because you had brought up the fact that before you switched your mind, like you switched your candidate in 2020 in the primaries. You had brought up Coach Bud, and so I'm asking, like, is anything less than a championship appearance from Milwaukee, is that a disappointment?
Absolutely.
Like, just
100%.
Could Coach Bud find himself in a situation similar to Brett Brown? Like, are they just going to trade jobs and shit? Like, what are they?
No, he's safe this year because he's developed a culture from nothing. But yes, they should be mightily disappointed. You know, they are the one team that was there because this is a weak East. Boston's going to be an exceptional team, but they're young. Like Jason Tatum, even though we're about to talk about him in a bit, like he's still so young. Like what he's going to be, he's not yet.
Yeah.
Like this Toronto team is a bunch of overachievers. They lost Kawhi. It's awesome. What a great story. Nick Nurse, you're the absolute man. And then this Miami team barely made the playoffs. The 8 seed last year. They get Jimmy Butler. They thought Jimmy was just going there to be a part of Miami culture. There was one team with championship aspirations.
By culture, you meant nightlife.
Correct. I thought that was assumed.
Miami Vice
So
nightlife.
none of these other teams really had championship aspirations. So yeah, it is.
Yeah.
This East was set up. If this was LeBron, we'd be like, oh, you better make it. Like we're not even going to give you this as an accomplishment if you don't like. So I definitely think that they can lose in the championship and be happy with themselves, but if they don't get there, that's a big deal.
That and I hate to say it, but I agree with you. And it in a bigger context of legacies, it really says a lot about LeBron, where it was like you said, like if you don't get at least to the championship and add another loss to your finals record, who the hell are you? And Giannis is literally he's gonna have to scratch to get there. He's gonna have to scratch, fight, claw, do whatever he has to. So if you're thinking long term and comparing two legacies amongst two very great basketball players, I think you did a great job of putting that perspective. So hey, great job. Hey, your first good take today, man. How does it feel?
Great day to be great. Let's move on to I want to finish with the OKC Houston and give us some time to talk about that. Boston is up 2-0 against Toronto. Toronto looked like they were going to even the series, and favorite of the podcast, Marcus Smart, drops 5 straight threes to kind of change the game.
Ooh,
Tatum,
Flower Mound Marcus here.
Tatum, I think, had 37. Exceptional game. We talked about him a little bit earlier about this talent, but is this series over? Thoughts on that series from what you guys have seen, and just I'll throw it over to you.
Man, I think Boston's gonna win it. I don't know in how many, but I think they've got the edge as far as maybe not. I don't know if you could say culture, but I think you've got the two best coaches in the league right now going up against each other. But Boston's just so much more dynamic, I think. Like, when Toronto's at their best, it's because one of the guys that's kind of a role guy or whatever goes off and finds his niche for that game and goes off. Boston is fortunate enough to have 3 guys that at, any night could be that guy on a number of other teams in this league. So Boston's just, if they don't fuck up, they've got more firepower than Toronto, and now with a 2-game lead, I don't see them coughing that up.
Yep, I'll keep my take short because I think JB nailed it. Any given time, if Jaylen Brown might be considered their 3rd best player, and I'm not sure that I would take Siakam over Jaylen Brown. So I just think that team is, and Jaylen Brown does an incredible job on Siakam. I think it's a bad matchup again. Boston doesn't really go for offensive rebounds. They just try and get back. And if you take Toronto out of the transition, their half court offense, I think, was like 27th in the league. They just have a tough time with that many. They have small guards, and their small guards have a tough time finishing in the half court, and they have to rely on someone getting hot from the 3-point line. And I think it's just a tough matchup. But Toronto has proven they have a ton of heart. they're gonna find a way to get 2 ugly wins. It's gonna be Boston in 6 is my guess here, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's less.
I like Boston in 6, and it sounds weird saying this about the reigning champions, but just like Nick Nurse is still kind of young in his career, they haven't really proven this pedigree that they have about them, the Raptors, right? Like you're the champion, but there really isn't too much tradition. There's not a whole. It's not like the guys that have been on the roster outside of Kyle Lowry have been there for so long, and they're a part of that. They're a part of that team and that culture. Like when we talk about Raptors culture, like damn near nothing comes to mind. And when we talk about Boston and we talk about Boston's culture and the kind of players that they have in their franchise year in and year out, you got guys. Like it used to be the Ray Allens and the KGs, but now you got a Marcus Smart that's able to change the game on both sides of the basketball on any given night. And that's a guy you're getting at a good price as well. And then you got Jason Tatum, who's a rising superstar in my opinion. I think Jason Tatum is. I think it's fair to say in the next coming years he's going to rise to be one of the top 8 players in the league, perhaps. I don't think that's too far of a stretch.
No.
And I don't see them letting this slip through their hands at all. At the most, we're going to see a game 6, if not 5.
So let's. I think we're all kind of on the same page there. We all
We certainly are.
Different versions of that. This last 9 minutes. Let's hit this OKC versus Houston game. We are currently live as the game's happening. So a lot of you guys, once you guys start watching it, this game will already be final and you'll know the results. We don't right now. It is 30-29. OKC is beating Houston at the end of quarter 1. Yeah. So again, kind of give us a prediction of who wins this game and talk to us a little bit about this series. We'll go and start with you, Sean.
I was watching that Nugget series a hell of a lot more than I was following the Rockets and Thunder. And if I'm just
lazy,
a little bit lazy, I'm sorry. I'm clocking a couple of hours a week at the job.
You got it.
Oh, here we go. But let me give you, if we're talking about soap operas and you want my emotional opinion over here, like
who do you want?
I dislike Westbrook so much. And I think it's extremely ironic that this a true point guard steps into his old shoes, if you will. I'm pulling for OKC at this point, man. I like James Harden. I already admitted on one of the previous podcasts, I think he's one of the most talented offensive players that we have ever seen. But my dislike or hate, if you will, for Russell Westbrook, it goes so far off the charts that I would love to see a Chris Paul just kind of be a true vet and pull this one off, man. So I'm rooting for the Thunder.
Dustin, what about you, man? I want to know this.
In the end, on this, I think it's 2 fairly matched teams. I want OKC to win as well because I think that redemption of Chris Paul being traded basically straight up and a bunch of first-round picks. This is his second P of the podcast.
Sean's – hold on. We're in the middle of Dustin's take on this series. We're going to get back to it. This is Sean's second piss break in an hour show, more or less. Unbelievable.
Matt, you should be
Dustin,
so ashamed.
Thunder or Rockets, man?
I'm going to pick Houston because in the end, I just think James Harden is a generational talent. There's things I like and don't like about him. But James Harden, when it comes down to it, getting baskets for him is very, very easy, and he can do it in every single way.
One of the easiest of ever.
Yeah, and as much as Chris Paul is a dog, he does all the things. I can't pick against the fact that James Harden at some point is going to just find 15, 16 points in a quarter. And OKC is just a flawed team. They don't have a lot of shooting. Steven Adams, someone who's picked on matchups for a lot of your career, probably have a unique take on that. But Steven Adams just constantly having to guard guards, not ever being a focal point of an offense, being asked to post up a lot. Houston just puts them in weird spots, and they really need Schroeder to have a big game. I think Dennis Schroeder, when he's played well, they've won. Or Chris Paul just takes over like Game 6. But I would love to see a Chris Paul press conference where he's just throwing shade at James Harden for wanting him gone and be like, some people are about it, some aren't. But in the end, James Harden is who I'm going to put my money on.
Jim?
Oh, I'm taking OKC for sure. There's no way I'm selecting a team that has James Harden on it because his complete indifference to defense just bothers me so goddamn much.
There's two of you that really love James Harden.
Hey, have you been to Oklahoma?
Fucking hate that
You
guy.
seen that
No, I
place?
have not.
I don't think we have. I think it's safe to say we don't
just
have
wait.
a lot of.
Wait
not a-
on Sean's last beer. He might have to pee again. We
I
have that
don't
much
know
time
enough
left.
about Oklahoma to be a fan of it.
I have a.
No, I mean,
bladder the
Sean, you're
size
not
of
gonna
a-
come back from the bathroom and get the next call. Okay, this is JB's turn. All right,
But I know people from Oklahoma, and they're fine people,
they are fine people.
Tiger King.
Elizabeth Warren.
except for that fun.
Fine people on both
Weirdo.
sides.
Yeah.
JB,
I for the first time ever, and it does not do me well to say this, but I'm cheering for a team from Oklahoma. As much shit as he's gotten, Steven Adams is still one of my favorite centers, and then Chris Paul, just to see him, things not work out in Houston, and people think that he's kind of on his way out, and then goes and takes a team that people really didn't expect to make the playoffs. To be honest, like I don't think that many basketball heads were saying, "Oh yeah, OKC in the top 6 in the West," and just does it. And just to see the kind of chip that he's always played with his whole career going up again. And I'm not a Rockets fan at all ever. And so to see him kind of stick it to them is cool. And it's, for me, the Mavs are out, so it's underdog time, and the Thunder fit the bill.
Is Chris Paul the last great true point guard?
Shit, he might be.
I mean, there's a lot of great point guards if we're going to throw Curry's.
I'm
in
saying,
the
like, you
mix
mean
and stuff,
like great,
You're
like
talking
great
like the
in the
true
sense of
traditional.
true.
Yeah,
like he
like-
can be great and he can still fit the what used to be a true point
the
guard.
mold of in position basketball, and now we're moving a little further away from that. But is he the last great true point guard? These the Stocktons of the world. Is this a dying breed right here? Is this what we're
I think
saying?
it is. They're asked to do different things now. So I think the game has evolved to where the point guard has to score. So I think that's a great point, that this might be the last type of that person. Sooner or later, there will be there's some really good guys that kind of still play like that, like a Mike Conley and a Goran Dragic. I think they still fit a lot of the traditional role, but they're not great.
Yeah.
They're pretty damn good, but they're not quite great. But
I think it's eventually gonna morph back to
the cyclical nature. Yeah.
there will still be position basketball, but right now, like assuming that positionless basketball is the wave of the future and it continues, I'd have to say yes. But I think it's going to come back because I think positionless basketball is going to prove to be a little bit of a fad.
Well, just the same way as now you can really only afford to play basketball with maybe one guy that's not capable of shooting the three. So you don't have to be super proficient at it, but you have to at least be able. And so right now it's to 1 through 4 can shoot the three and can score and do stuff. And you can tolerate a center like Gobert or like Adams that's not really an offensive powerhouse at all. It might come back to that where now eventually 2 through 5 can be guys that fill it up and guys that can really shoot. You might be able to tolerate playing with a point guard that just sets everybody up. But man, Chris Paul is the last of a certain breed, and you wouldn't mention him in your top 30 or maybe even 40 3-point shooters in the league, but that's what it took to win the other night. Yeah. So he did it, and it's all at 6 feet 6'1".
Well, we'll save any more points for the next podcast on this, but thank you guys for joining us. Make sure you guys like and share, and then we're gonna let the Urban Cowboy Sean the Sheriff Spain. Put your hat on. Put your hat on, boy.
What are you
Y'all
doing?
went full names on the podcast.
Sean the Sheriff.
Full names on the internet here.
Oh,
All right, guys. I gotta.
Hold
The
on.
Sheriff. Send us out.
I got a
I have to
nice.
steal your identity. Hang on. Just give me a minute.
I got a nice non-traditional closure here. Have y'all ever seen those posts on Facebook where it's like, "Hey, your friend has 2 hours to see this post, or they have to buy." I got my girlfriend Maddie on the clock. She has an hour to like, share, and follow
Maddie,
this.
you better like, share.
And if she doesn't,
oh,
boys, we're going to Vietnam for Thanksgiving. Telling you right now. All right, you heard it here. We're gonna take a week off for Thanksgiving on the show. Y'all like, follow, subscribe, share
all that shit.
We'll see y'all
Make
next
it
week, guys.
See y'all next time.